Hey, what's up everyone? How we all doing, man? Back with another video. I hope you're all well. So, I think you can probably draw the line as to why this video has come up, the fall of Saigon. You know, there's been a lot of comparisons past few weeks about how the West have dealt with Afghanistan, and I know more in America specifically it's been compared to like the fall of Saigon, but I think it pretty much goes for the West, and that's how it's kind of been treated. I watched a brilliant documentary on Netflix about the war in Vietnam because, to be honest, we're not really taught about it here at school. They pretty much don't touch on it at all, other than it was just another proxy war in the fight against communism. That's all it's kind of talked about. I don't think the Korean War even gets a mention. Pretty bad, really, but it's just how it is. So, the fall of Saigon, the end of the Vietnam War. To be honest, I'm quite surprised this video is only 12 minutes because this is a super complex thing to discuss, but you know, I'm ready for it. And it's simple history as well. You guys always tell me to correct simple history, and for some reason it just kind of never gets done. But let's jump into it. I don't want to bore you guys, but it's good to see you all again, man.
15 seconds to get set up. Click the link in the description below to get started today. The fall of Saigon, April 30th, 1975. The end of the Vietnam War. After almost 2 decades of fighting and millions of lives lost, the Vietnam War came to an end in 1975. Hardly anyone believed that after 19 years of bitter fighting, the conflict would be resolved in just 2 months. In March 1975, the strength and superiority of the South Vietnamese forces gave the impression that the conflict was still far from over. Yet on the last day of April, the North Vietnamese flag was waving in Saigon. The collapse of South Vietnam had already begun in 1973, when American forces started leaving the country. This withdrawal of troops was followed by a reduction in financial and military aid. After President Nixon resigned, he was replaced by Gerald Ford, who was unable to convince Congress to honor Nixon's promises to rescue Saigon from a communist takeover. With the War Powers Act introduced, there was practically no chance of the United States returning its troops to South Vietnam. In fact, the Americans had left an enormous amount of weapons and equipment with their allies, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN.
I mean, this is the thing that I know it's kind of been expressed as America, and it's because obviously it was America. But this is the thing that the West in general do a lot, man. When they leave, they just leave fucking everything there, man. Do you remember when the first time you saw ISIS on TV, and they was driving around in like American Humvees, and you're like, well, how's this happened? Do you know what I mean? And the news just kind of brushed over the fact that they had, you know, pretty decent bits of artillery here and there. And I saw a video the other day. It could be fake because you know most of the internet's fake, and it was the Taliban flying a Black Hawk helicopter. I was like, well, how's that work then? How have they figured that one? But I find the whole Afghanistan situation very weird. I do. There's something that just doesn't sit right with me about it. I think you guys will probably know what I mean.
In 1973, the ARVN numbered almost 1 million soldiers and definitely had a numerical advantage over its enemies. The weak and corrupt government in Saigon, led by President Nguyen Van Thieu, however, made this advantage meaningless. With American financial aid ending up in the pockets of politicians, the ARVN was denied fuel, ammunition, and supplies to support its advantage. By the end of 1974, this advantage had practically disappeared. Even more worrying, though, was the low morale of the general public, resulting in limited support for the Army's operations in the country. Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, was rebuilding its strength after losses suffered in 1972. In December 1974, they initiated an attack.
The 1972 is talking about when they started really heavily napalming it. I can't remember what the operation's name was, but American napalmed the fuck out of North Viet, man. Oh no, they destroyed the Ho Chi Minh Trail, didn't they? And the Ho Chi Minh Trail went through Laos and Cambodia. Yeah, and you guys just absolutely destroyed it.
1972. In December 1974, they initiated an attack on Phuc Long Province. The aim of the attack was to test the strength and morale of the ARVN and gauge American willingness to interfere in the conflict. With no response from the Americans, the North Vietnamese decided in March 1975 to launch a larger offensive against the ARVN troops in the Central Highlands. 5 NVA divisions supported by artillery and new tanks received from the Soviet Union attacked on March 1st. Troops of the ARVN fought bravely, but were surrounded when the NVAs entered the town of Ban My Thuột. With the key road to Saigon cut off, President Thieu ordered the rest of his troops in the Central Highlands to march to the coast, and from there south to Saigon. The withdrawal, under fire, turned into a chaotic flight of soldiers and civilians. In the northern parts of the country, the situation wasn't any different. An all-out attack by the NVA forces pushed the ARVN forces to the coastal city of Da Nang. With a total collapse of the command chain, soldiers started evacuating by sea.
I wonder how South Vietnamese prisoners were treated as opposed to American prisoners. Like, do you reckon it was worse, or... I imagine the South Vietnamese would have got it even worse, maybe seen as traitors. I'm not sure. But if you've never watched the film Deer Hunter, go watch Deer Hunter, man. That's a great film. Loosely based in Vietnam. It kind of skips back and forth between America, but Deer Hunter, great film. Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, all that. And you know the popular Vietnam films, Platoon and Full Metal Jacket. Great films.
More than 70,000 of them failed to escape and ended up being captured by the NVA. The spring offensive ended by the end of March and was a complete success for the NVA. Surprised by their easy victory, the North Vietnamese decided not to wait until the following year, as was the plan, but to attack the capital city of Saigon straight away. Facing a total defeat, President Thieu ordered his troops to organize the defense at the town of Xuân Loc. The South Vietnamese believed they could stop the communists right there at the gateway of Saigon. Indeed, they fought bravely, causing more than 2,000 casualties among the NVA. But despite this, the ARVN troops couldn't repel the relentless onslaught of NVA troops. Once they were surrounded, the South Vietnamese withdrew southwards. On April 20th, the NVA troops entered the town. The Battle of Xuân Loc was the last major battle of the Vietnam War. There was practically nothing between the NVA forces and Saigon. The fall of the capital city was imminent. People inside the city were panic-stricken. Memories of the 1960s.
Imagine how scared you'd be if you was just a normal civilian and you knew that... I think, you know what it would be? Mostly, I think it would be the not knowing. Like, how are they going to treat us? Like, will they just pull us under their regime? Which would probably be the better option? Or will they slaughter us? Will they... You know, you just don't know, man. It's the not knowing. But, you know, not wanting to find out. And like probably the people in Afghanistan feel now. Yeah.
Was imminent. People inside the city were panic-stricken. Memories of the 1968 massacre in the town of Hue were fresh in their memories, and many feared something similar would happen there in Saigon. The Americans and South Vietnamese linked to the government believed they had the most reason to be afraid. When the spring offensive began, the first American citizens had already started to fly out of Saigon. In early April, members of the American Defense Attaché Office, the DAO, started to leave the city as well. At the same time, President Ford announced the beginning of Operation Baby Lift. The aim of the operation was to evacuate children from the country and take them to other countries for adoption. Most of the children went to the United States, but some also found families in Australia, Canada, France, and West Germany. The operation began with a tragedy, though. A plane carrying children and DAO staff crashed, killing everyone on board. However, the operation managed to save more than 2,500 children. More extensive was the evacuation of American embassy personnel and other employees of the American government. These included not only American citizens, but also citizens of foreign countries and a great number of South Vietnamese. All of them, along with their families, were desperate to escape.
You know what it kind of reminds me of as well? I know I keep referencing films, but, you know. Yeah, if you've ever watched Hotel Rwanda, you know when like the UN sent in troops, but it was just to evacuate European citizens and American citizens. It reminds me of that. You're just leaving people to their deaths. You know, which is not necessarily the fault of the troops on the ground. It's really not. But it's just a grand scale, it could have been handled better, which is what we keep hearing about Afghanistan. There's still Americans out there now. There's still British people out there, as far as I'm aware. It's just not great, man.
When, on April 21st, Son Loc fell into the hands of the North Vietnamese, the evacuation escalated. Evacuees gathered at the DAO compound next to Tan Son Nhut Airport. From there, they were transferred to the Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, and the Yokota Air Base in Japan. At that point, 20 C-141 and 20 C-130 aircraft landed each day at Tan Son Nhut. On April 27th, the NVA forces launched rocket attacks into Saigon. On the following day, 3 A-37 Dragonflies of the North Vietnamese People's Air Force bombed the Tan Son Nhut Air Base. The attacks continued into the early morning of April 29th. U.S. Ambassador Graham Martin, who was in charge of the evacuation, decided to call off all fixed-wing evacuations. He called for Operation Frequent Wind to begin, the evacuation by helicopters. A helicopter evacuation was already planned as an option. There was an established map of assembly areas, and when the evacuation signal was transmitted on the Armed Forces radio, the prepared code, "The temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees and rising," was read out, followed by the playing of the song "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas." After the evacuation was initiated, buses picked up evacuees from assembly areas and transferred them to the DAO compound. From there, helicopters from the Naval Air Force and CIA-controlled Air America flew evacuees to one of the 11 ships of the Task Force 76, which were joined by the USS Hancock and the USS Midway aircraft carriers. The NVA anti-aircraft batteries avoided firing at American aircraft. They didn't want to provoke any response from the Americans that would jeopardize their operation. They did, however, continue to shell the airstrip and the DAO compound. It was only a matter of hours before the...
I mean, you would think, we're getting away with this at the minute. If you don't want to piss America off and have them restart the war, because, a loss of American life all over the media would stir up heat of the American people to call for war again. In fact, I probably don't think it would, but it would certainly make things harder for the North Vietnamese. I think at that point, the Americans were just done with the war as a people. And you always hear about the DC, all the protests that happen in DC, mate, war not love, the time of the hippies and all that good stuff, I guess.
The compound would fall into the hands of the North Vietnamese. By the evening, it became impossible for the evacuation of DAO to continue, and helicopters were rerouted to the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. 30 minutes after midnight on April 30th, the last of the Marines protecting the site left the DAO compound, but only after they had set it on fire. More than 10,000 people gathered in front of the embassy waiting to be evacuated. Unfortunately, there was no time for all of them to be saved, even though every 10 minutes one CH-46 and CH-53 were landing and taking off in the embassy. With NVA troops already entering the city, the evacuation had to be completed fast. The last of the Marine security guards took off from the embassy rooftop at 7:53 a.m. During the evacuation process, other locations were used as well as those that had been designated. One Air America Bell 205 helicopter landed on the rooftop of the Pittman apartment building at 22 Zalong Street to collect a South Vietnamese intelligence officer, along with several other evacuees. Some South Vietnamese even used their own aircraft to get out of the city as well, especially military figures and their families. Several South Vietnamese helicopters landed on ships of the Task Force 76. Each of them was thrown overboard to make room for the other helicopters that were coming in. Some South Vietnamese pilots even deliberately crashed their aircraft into the sea after they had disembarked their evacuees. After the fall...
Jesus, you imagine how desperate you'd have to be doing stuff like this. I suppose, it's pretty much certain death at this point if you stay in Saigon, if you're a military member, an informant, a Westerner. It's pretty much certain death, so anything seems better than that. People crashing their helicopter straight into the sea. That's crazy.
Of Son Loc, President Thieu was forced to resign on April 21st. He was succeeded by Vice President Tran Van Huong, who also resigned 7 days later. The last president of South Vietnam was General Duong Van Minh. After suffering such a series of defeats, the ARVN was in a state of chaos. What was left of it, under the command of the 3rd Corps, organized the defense of Saigon. On April 27th, the first rockets fell on the city, marking the beginning of the fall of Saigon. The following day, the NVA troops were already on the outskirts of the city. Officers and soldiers of the ARVN defending the city were reluctant to fight and were surrendering en masse to the NVAs. On April 30th, a final push was made to seize the city. ARVN soldiers guarding the Tan Son Nhut air base put up a fierce defense against the NVAs. They withdrew from the base only after President Min announced the unconditional surrender of his forces at 10:24 a.m. At noon, NVA tanks stormed the presidential palace. Inside was President Min, sitting with his counselors on chairs on the palace steps, waiting to hand over the government. Later that day, he announced in a radio broadcast that the Saigon government was now dissolved. On May 7th, NVA troops held a victory parade in the streets of Saigon, which was renamed Ho Chi Minh City after the late North Vietnamese leader. The fall of Saigon on April 30th, 1975, marked the end of the Vietnam War after 19 and a half years.
I can't even begin to imagine like the horror. Yeah, I can see this. Oh. Okay. You can't even begin to imagine the horror. You know, it's not necessarily for yourself. Oh my god, that looks like a good video. It's not even necessarily for yourself. It's if you've got a family. Like I think, and I don't mean to do the whole hero complex thing, but as a man, you think, right, you know, this is probably going to be the end of me, man, but I've got to get my wife and kids out. Do you know what I mean? You can't. I think that's what it'd be, man. It'd be the fear for your loved ones rather than the fear for yourself, because you know you're facing imminent death. Yeah, you know what the image that come to me during that when they said like the troops were surrendering. Do you remember that iconic image of? I think it is probably a South Vietnamese soldier being shot in the head by a pistol by the North Vietnamese soldier, and the picture's taken like mid shot. That picture come to me. I think between, and I was having a similar discussion the other day, of like the worst wars to be involved in, and for me it was a toss up between the Vietnam War because just of how horrific it was for the troops out there, and the Eastern Front in World War II. These were the two that really come to my head. Like being either a Russian or a German soldier on the Eastern Front would have been absolutely horrible, which is an understatement. But it's kind of a sick and morbid question to ask, but is there a war that you can think of that, you know, if there was one war you could avoid, you wouldn't want to be in that one? Because from what I've seen, the clips and read about Vietnam, that was hell for the soldiers. Spike pits, napalm. It was like a war on creative mode. Do you know what I mean? It's one of them. Let me know what you guys thought. I love these simple history. I'm not sure if this will even get put up, to be honest. I've got a sneaky feeling this is going to get copyrighted, which is okay if it just takes the monetization off. That's fine. But if it just doesn't let me put it up at all, it's like But if you want to see me react to more, 100%. I really want to do this one next, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna do it regardless of the comments. But you know, let me know what you guys want to see for sure. And I'm moving out again soon, so there's going to be a new place in the upcoming weeks, so a new background again. I feel like since I made this channel, I've moved out like 3 or 4 times. But you know, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, man. I really appreciate it. I really, really do, man. I don't feel like I say that enough. I do appreciate the views. It means a lot. But you take it easy, guys. Peace out and have a great day.